somewhere a place for us, peace and
Greetings from Castle Goring, from Nikki, Aurora, and from me. We are going to start off today on a happy note because on Sunday I had the great pleasure of going to my premarital boyfriend and his lovely wife, who's a dear friend of mine, the portrait painter Basha Kazmarowska Hamilton's. Their son Felix had a birthday party, which was just absolutely heavenly. And because we're going to be ending this program on a rather controversial note, I am going to ask Sean to post one or two photographs of what was an absolutely gorgeous and happy event. Ian is a great gardener, and they have a wonderful garden their house is near Battlebury, where, of course, the Middletons live. And it was wonderful to see so many old friends, and really marvelous time. And I'm going to post one or two photographs that were taken at the event, only one or two, just to give you a flavor, because it was such a gorgeous day. Everything was out not everything, but a lot was out in the garden. And they have various places to sit in the garden, which was just heaven on earth. And it was a really happy occasion. So I'm going to ask Sean to post now, and then I will jump in because, as I said, at the end of this, we are touching upon something really very fraught and rather controversial that I asked people if they wanted me to touch upon, and several of them said yes. So, first of all, though, the truly happy bit. So, now that we are off the happy bit, let's get on to the more controversial bit. Tammy Clark says, "Hello, Lady C. Have you heard of the upcoming broadcast Queen Victoria's Secret Marriage, Secret Child, which will be aired by Channel 4 at 9 p.m. on July the 31st? So that's 2 nights away from now. In it, British historian Fern Riddell explores the possibility of a secret marriage between Queen Victoria and her devoted manservant John Brown after the death of Prince Albert. A Midwestern American woman claims to be the descendant of a child born of that union. The article I read on the Sunday Times Online seemed to present a good bit of evidence to support the claim. Given your extensive knowledge regarding royal history, What is your take on the possibility of such a union having taken place? Have you heard anything about Queen Victoria having a child in her 40s? Thank you. Love to you and the fur babies from the USA. Well, I know as a fact that Queen Victoria's daughters, especially Princess Louise, Duchess of Argyll, and Princess Helena, who was Princess Christian of Schleswig-Holstein, that they used to refer to John Brown as their mother's lover, or sometimes their mother's boyfriend. I also know that Princess Beatrice redacted, in fact, she rewrote all of Queen Victoria's personal diaries. And the word within royal circles and family circles, including the Argyll family circles, is that they were more than likely lovers. Whether they were married or not was a moot point, but it would not have been surprising if they were lovers that they would also have had a secret marriage, because she was sufficiently religious. In those days, if you could get married, you would get married if it was a committed relationship. She certainly thereafter, once she and John Brown became close, she certainly went out of her way to lead a very private life out of the public eye with him. Historians have, over the decades, attributed this to the fact that she was in a mourning, but she stopped mourning after, well, to an extent, I should say. She came out of mourning in part, but not in toto. He certainly put a smile back on her face. And there is the theory that thereafter she used the excuse of mourning to have a retired life with John Brown, because she couldn't have the close personal relationship that they had for the next 20 or so years if she were performing her duties in public, because questions would have been asked as to why this low-born Scotsman was always with her and why he spoke to her the way he did. He used to say to woman, come here, and woman this and woman that. And she thrilled to his dominant masculinity. Whether they had a child or not is a moot point. I'm open to the possibilities. She certainly was very fertile with Prince Albert, and there is good reason to suppose that her fertility, although it began to taper off in her 40s, got her into trouble because she certainly loved sex. Her diaries are full of how much she loved sex. Did she, in her early 40s, give up that part of life till her death at 81 or 80? I can't remember whether she was 80 or 81, but she was certainly no spring chicken. And there is a lot of evidence to suggest that their relationship was intimate. not only because of things the daughters used to say. And the Prince of Wales at the time, Bertie, was rabidly against the relationship. And when Queen Victoria died, she was buried with intimate items, personal items, not only of Prince Albert, but of John Brown. Do I think it's possible it's true? Yes. Do I think it's likely it's true? Possibly. Do I know any of this to be true? I think Princess Beatrice went to great lengths to prevent us from ever finding out definitively. However, if this putative descendant should do a DNA test that came up with sufficient evidence to prove that she is a descendant of royalty, and it's very easy to do. It may not be easily executed legally, but it's certainly easy to do. There are countless descendants of Queen Victoria who could provide samples, hair samples, blood samples, samples from the mouth, DNA samples. So let's leave it at that for the moment. I think it's a show well worth looking at if you have any interest in the subject. And really, she's been dead for so long, what difference does it make? And also, I think it would have been wonderful if she had happiness again, and she wouldn't be the only queen or female royal who had had an illegitimate child. There is some doubt as to whether Catherine the Great's son and heir was really her husband's child. Many people think it was Count Olaf's child. One of the Russian Grand Duchesses who married the Grand Duke of Mecklenburg-Schwerin and whose daughter became Queen of Denmark, she had an illegitimate child with her lover after her husband died. Princess Thyra of Denmark, who became the Duchess of Cumberland and the Crown Princess of Hanover, she had an illegitimate child. So I just throw all of that out for good measure. And incidentally, her sister, Princess Alexandra of Denmark, became Queen Victoria's daughter-in-law and subsequently Queen of the United Kingdom. So, Jacqueline Reed says, hello, Lady C. Hello, Jacqueline Reed. One question springs to mind regarding the situations of the Macrons' visit to the UK state banquet and visit to Windsor Castle. With everyone knowing the true origins of this relationship and Prince Andrew being outcast from all state occasions, I wonder how this would have sat with Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth if she were still on the throne. I respect that such occasions are designed for the benefit of Parliament, but have really actually the benefit of the state as opposed to Parliament. But having these two people at the table when her immediate family is blocked would, I think, have made a very uncomfortable situation for our late Queen. How do you think she would have dealt with it? Thank you for all your time and energy invested in this channel. Thank you. And I love the work I do, I have to tell you, and I love the feedback that I get. even at the party on Sunday, several people said to me, keep up the good work. So I'm glad people think it's worthwhile. It makes it really very much more purposeful and therefore very much easier to do. Well, the Queen was very correct. She was very dispassionate in executing her duty, which she executed very passionately. She, I am sure, would have done nothing different from what King Charles III has done. It would have been a glorious opportunity for the King or the late Queen to have made a point by having Prince Andrew at the banquet, because Prince Andrew, remember, has denied any congress whatsoever and any relationship of any note whatsoever with the late Virginia Giuffre, who was 17 years old and on the game by her own account when they met. She was older than Emmanuel Macron was when he met Brigitte Trogneux. I make that point for what it's worth. I think they should have simply infiltrated Prince Andrew to make the point that why should Prince Andrew be pilloried for something that the Macrons are celebrated despite and revered in many circles. If they did nothing wrong, how could it be that Prince Andrew did something wrong? Because all Virginia Giuffre's claims are ludicrous. She was trafficked. Her father took her to the airport. She got on the plane of her own free will. She collected, according to her, $15,000 for having told Jeffrey Epstein that she had swung things with Prince Andrew. This is by her own account. She sent a photograph, according to her account, to her aunt, very proudly saying, look who I met the other evening. But he is persona non grata, and the Macrons are not. However, I don't think the Queen would have done what I think in their shoes I would have done. I would have, without saying a word, just asked Andrew. That's what I would have done. I think it would have been the correct thing to do. After all, if you know a member of your family is being pilloried unfairly, I can understand taking the diplomatic route and taking the caution route and taking the expedient route. But I really don't see why you should avoid taking the courageous route, even if it turns out to be rather more controversial and less diplomatic than would be appreciated. You see, I don't think I'd have made a very good queen. Ruthie says, Lady C, a pleasure listening to you as ever. I couldn't resist that. Thank you very much. Question, can the king save Henry and Majesty and have them removed from the royal family website due to the fact that they voluntarily resigned from their jobs. Andrew stepped back. Would this actually resolve that sticky situation? Well, of course, the Meghanites and the Heroldians and the Sussex squad would be up in arms about it. But who cares, really? I mean, I know the royals care, but really, should they? I'm not so sure. Sometimes, as I've often pointed out to my children, in fact, I've always said to them in old times, seriously consider the fact that where a situation requires courage, be courageous after you have given it careful thought, because every situation in life has expected and unexpected consequences. And it has been my experience in life that it behooves us to be courageous, that ultimately, even if there are short-term disadvantages, the long-term benefits of courage when you are in the right. You have to be in the right. If you're not in the right, it's called brazenness. It's called Meganian. It's called Heroldian. It's not to be recommended. But if you are in the right, absolutely do it. Would this help the problem? I think it would compound it where certain people were concerned, because Andrew is very unpopular in the mainstream media. And they, in the mainstream media, like Harry and Meghan for their various reasons, even when they dislike them. They like the fact that they can use, exploit, niggle, prod, provoke Harry and Meghan's existence and create trouble and create mischief and create content and create stories, which to them is wonderful. But they have traduced Andrew to such a point that they cannot retrieve the situation where Andrew is concerned so that they could use Andrew. So, do you see why to dump Harry and Meghan, which they could do on those grounds, that anybody who resigns voluntarily from royal duties is immediately removed from the royal family website? They could do it. They could issue a statement that they are revising the website and these are the reasons why they are revising it, and create new rules. The royal family has been extremely adept at creating new rules when it suited them and when they perceived that it suited them. Sometimes it suits them and they don't perceive it. I make that point for what it's worth. But I'll use one or two examples. In 1937, when the Duke of Windsor married Wallis Simpson, what did the royal family do? It reserved the Royal Highness style for the Duke of Windsor alone and broke precedents and said that it could not be shared with his wife, notwithstanding the fact that one of the cornerstones of English and Scottish law is that a wife is the equal of her husband at all times, unless she is his superior, in which case she remains his superior. So what they did was totally against custom and actually against all precedent and therefore against the law. And the Duke of Windsor thought of suing, And he could have sued, but he wasn't a Harry. And so he didn't sue, but he could have sued. And the likelihood is he would have prevailed in the courts, because there is no way any judge who was anything but a suck-up merchant would have been able to find against him had he brought the lawsuit. That was one example. Another, when they stripped Sarah and Diana of their Royal Highness rank. It had never been done before in those circumstances. Another, when George V stripped Prince Alistair of Connaught of not only his highness style, but his princely rank. So you see, as and when it suits them, they make it up as they go along. And the last of all of the let's make it up as we go along because it suits us was when Charles married Camilla and she became known as Her Royal Highness, the Duchess of Cornwall, even though she was Her Royal Highness, the Princess of Wales. And they made the announcement that she would, when and if he acceded to the throne, she would be known as the Princess Consort. And that, of course, changed as well. And I don't know how many of you are aware of it, that I am one of the very few people who all along said Camilla should become queen. I said it from the very outset. I said it before the marriage. I said they should get married. I said she should become queen. And I wasn't predicting. I was simply asserting what was, in my view, the correct procedure according to British custom and law. So, but will it happen? Well, let's see how attentive the royal circle remains to, shall we say, the problems that Harry and Meghan have caused. Because I can tell you, the mainstream media is feeding people a whole line of crock. Barbara Luce says, yes, please reveal what the bongo drums say about Jeffrey Epstein. And Maria Elizabeth Langans says, yes, please tell us. Donna Besley says, you must tell us what you know. These are 3 representative comments out of so many I can't tell you. So I just thought I'd give you a taste of what people have been saying. So I am now going to go into what's up in a limited way, I have to say. I'm not going to go into this in such controversial depth that I caused people to have a heart attack. But I am going to go into what is the prevailing wisdom in dispassionate circles as to what has gone on with the whole matter and how it came about and how and where it's at the moment. And this, of course, is a huge problem for the Trump administration. It is a huge problem for the American state. It is a huge problem for the bureaucrats who run the American state, irrespective of which president from which party is in power. I want you to remember when this started. I made notes as to the timeline, I'm going to see if I can find them. Yes, here we go. All of this started in 2005, and it started accidentally, organically. It was like the backlash against Blake Lively's promotion of the film It Ends With Us, where it was just people, something happens that is accidental, and just as how Blake Lively has taken the view that there was an orchestrated campaign against her when there wasn't, people who want to say that this started as a conspiracy, it didn't. It started naturally and organically in 2005 when the parents of a 14-year-old girl who Jeffrey Epstein had paid for massages noticed that she had a significant sum of money. And when they found out she was receiving, if I remember correctly, it was $300 per massage, they absolutely flipped and went to the police. That is how it started. It was, you can imagine, once it started, because Jeffrey Epstein was very much a Democrat supporter. He was a great friend of Bill Clinton, who was a great friend of his. He was a great friend of Hillary Clinton as well. And I will give George W. Bush full marks. He did not, nor did his people, set about creating a bigger drama of this than they could. They did not exploit it for political gain. The then U.S. Attorney Alex Acosta, who in 2017 would become Trump's Labor Secretary, he is the one who prosecuted the matter. The Republicans really did not exploit it for political gain, as I have said. And they understood that Epstein was, even though he was a supporter of the Democrats, George W. Bush was sufficiently correct and traditional, and I think responsible, to understand that if he tried to bring down former President Clinton and destroy his reputation, he would be damaging the reputation of the United States of America. And I have said time and again, the French system of going after ex-presidents is so misguided, because it ultimately means that people have less respect for the state. Because when the state has a series of ex-presidents who end up in the court system for crimes, it doesn't reflect well on the nation. So, and I have to tell you, I absolutely deplored George W. Bush. I was dead against his adventurism in Iraq. I was dead against what he did with Saddam Hussein. I was dead against all of that. I absolutely deplore Tony Blair as a result of it as well, notwithstanding the fact that he would have gone down in history as a great prime minister had he not sucked up to George W. Bush with the understanding that when his term of office was over, he would be able to make an absolute fortune, which he has made. So, in 2008, and now remember, this is 3 years into when the complaint started. So you can see how gingerly everybody was handling the matter, because Jeffrey Epstein was well known to be very well connected. And Jeffrey Epstein was also to be a Mossad agent. And those who don't think that there is a powerful Israeli lobby in the United States are not on this planet. So for all those reasons, both political parties were not making capital out of it. And in 2008, he pled guilty to charges of solicitation of purchasing the favors and of minors, that is, girls under the age of 18. And he was sentenced to 18 months in a minimum security facility and allowed out for 12 hours virtually every day. So he had a real sweetheart deal. And the sweetheart deal was that he would get a light punishment, everybody would look the other way, and he also signed an agreement with the state, but it was a federal agreement that Epstein and everybody connected to him would have immunity from prosecution thereafter. This is where there is a huge problem in terms of whether a state can or should ever, even though it can, whether it should ever go back against its agreements. Anyway, by 2010, he was released after serving less than 13 months in prison. And he, as I say, he didn't really serve it in prison. He was out every day, but he had to sleep there. Poor Jeffrey. My heart bleeds for him, doesn't yours? I think if we were Meghan, we'd say at least 10 chairs left eye. Unbelievable. But I have to say, you need to view this in the context of the fact that neither political party wanted at this point to grasp the hot potato in case it burnt the hands of not only them, but the state of the United States of America. In 2010, there were a whole load of lawsuits brought by various of the women who had been involved with him, and they were all settled very advantageously to them. Enter Sharon Churchill and prompting Virginia Giuffre. And in 2015, after Virginia Giuffre has bobbed up again, and she has accused, I don't remember if it was at that time, but she certainly subsequently accused President Clinton of untoward conduct. Anyway, she sued Ghislaine Maxwell for defamation after Ghislaine Maxwell called her a liar for claiming that she was a victim in a conspiracy run by Maxwell and Epstein. And she made a great deal of money with a great deal of accusations. So in 2017, Ghislaine Maxwell settled the lawsuit. And then a journalist called Julie K. Brown with the Miami Herald filed motions to unseal records for the case. And they were pushing for the public's right to access and their right to cover what they called the, shall we say, mistreatment, since this is YouTube, of dozens of underage girls in the United States and in that state itself. I think by then any girl under the age of 18 was regarded as a minor. So 2018, the Miami Herald publishes a series of investigative reports into Epstein and the role of Acosta in the plea bargain, which was a real sweetheart deal. In the meantime, Sharon Churcher and the Daily Mail, or the Mail on Sunday, have been pursuing it on the other side of the Atlantic. Because they know about the picture with Prince Andrew, and they are and Sharon Churcher has, and it's there in black and white, encouraging memories from Virginia Giuffre and prompting her to remember things that she might have forgotten. Let's put it that way. So you now have the mainstream media in both countries really for their own ends going after the revival of this matter. And at that point, I am informed because remember, this is now Trump is in power. Trump is virtually assured of re-election, according to certain people. And by the way, I'm being totally non-partisan in this. So those of you who are pro-Democrat or pro-Republican, please, I'm not interested in the party politics of it all. I'm only interested in what happened and why it apparently happened. Trump is regarded generally all over the world as a shoe-in for re-election owing to the way the economy is doing. And Hillary Clinton, of course, has already tanked. However, according to the sources that I have been speaking to, they thought, let's derail Trump. Let's derail the election. Let's try to go after Acosta, and let's try to go after Trump, because there are photographs of Trump with Epstein. Even though the proof is incontrovertible that Trump banned Epstein from Mar-a-Lago once he decided he was a sleazebag, and Clinton never did any such thing, and the Clintons were infinitely closer to Epstein than Trump. Evidently those who wanted to derail Trump's re-election thought, right, let's make something of this. And they are the ones who, in the state of New York, which is a strongly Democrat state, at least was at the time, they are the ones who managed to get the federal immunity from prosecution agreement unpicked to charge Epstein, deciding that if they could handle matters carefully, Trump would be in the frame and Clinton would be out of the frame. And Clinton, in any event, could not be re-elected. And there was little or no prospect of Hillary Clinton running again. Because remember, she had been defeated in 2016 by Trump. So they decided, let's unpick it. We can find a way of using this against Trump. They duly arrested Epstein in breach of the federal immunity agreement. He was arrested on the 6th of July 2019. On the 12th of July, Acosta resigned as Labour Secretary. On the 10th of August, Epstein was found dead in the Metropolitan Correctional Centre. This was the start of the next wave. Of course, once Epstein was dead, that didn't preserve Trump's position. But for whatever reason, it seems to have preserved Clinton's position. Then, of course, to make absolutely sure that Trump would not be re-elected once COVID hit, that was also exploited by the Democrats to derail Trump's chances of re-election, and it succeeded in doing so. Well, with the devil having died, they needed some other scapegoat. Hence, Prince Andrew and Ghislaine Maxwell, two Brits. She's serving a sentence for Jeffrey Epstein, and Virginia Giuffre, who by her own account was a groomer and an enthusiastic one and a well-paid one, was never charged with anything. And I have gone through previously how the case against Prince Andrew was, according to a colleague of David Boyes, who was a friend of mine and who explained to me what was really going on with the Prince Andrew business. And it was really to preserve the Clintons' position. And I don't want to go into that now because it's fruitless. Fast forward to today. Trump has, who is, as we all know, he shoots from the hip. And he has really delivered mixed messages recently, which have upset his supporters and advanced the cause of his detractors. But there seems to be recalibration taking place at the moment. And Trump, ironically enough, has been as presidential as President George W. Bush was. In recognizing that this is a situation that goes so deep into the state level, the state not being the state of New York, incidentally, or the state of Washington, the United States of America as a sovereign state. So, because America has this state that we need to be careful what we're actually speaking about. And it won't bring down Trump, because Trump is not guilty of having behaved badly. So Trump has nothing to hide from that point of view. And even Democrats who are rational can see that, because had he been somebody who was going to be in the frame for incorrect behavior, the Biden administration would have leaked it, and they didn't, because there was nothing there. And let's remember that Trump has been accused of Russiagate, golden showers, all sorts of things, but never accused of that. So I think we can safely conclude that whatever his motives and my understanding is that that Trump has a sense of history, as indeed does George W. Bush. And they have both shied away from making political capital of it. But it is inevitable that it is going to be a political hot potato and a political football. And let us see where it leads from here, because yes, many politicians will take advantage, as indeed has happened with the arrest of Jeffrey Epstein. And there is doubtless the possibility of them trying to take advantage of the present murkiness of the situation. And of course, people who don't like Trump will say, oh, well, of course, that's all very good and well, but we don't like him. And yeah, he's somehow implicated and he's covering up. I think to an extent he's behaved very responsibly, but I think the time has come for all responsible politicians on both sides of the political divide to understand that this situation is indicative of why it is dangerous for party politics to be misused, because it ultimately ends up being to the detriment of the country's well-being. Of course, there are also politicians abroad who are very anti-Trump. They are very anti many of his positions. Even if they aren't anti many of his positions, they are anti him because they just don't like him, because he has, to them, a very unsettling way of behaving. And don't think that they have not been orchestrating behind the scenes, because they have. And they have been taking full advantage of any situation in the United States of America that would play well with their sympathies. And in this number, I now include Macron, the British Whitehall establishment, Keir Starmer, many of the European leaders. They, let's not forget how they helped to orchestrate the unsettlement of the announcement that Zelensky was in Washington for. This is what's going on geopolitically. It is a fight for the soul of Western civilization. It's not particularly party politics, because conservative politicians in this country are sympathizing with many of the things that go on that you would think they would not sympathize with. So it's all maybe pretty confusing if you don't see what's truly going on and what the big pictures and what the objectives are. And the objectives at this moment are to derail the Trump administration's desire to institute what they regard as changes in the United States national way of doing things. And so it's far bigger than just the Democrats and the Republicans, and it involves the bureaucracy from several of the other states that are a part of NATO. So I'm sure people will say, oh, we can't believe that. This is elaborate. This is a conspiracy theory. It's not a conspiracy theory. It is coincidental interests colliding and adept politicians taking advantage of the situation. This is what realpolitik is about. This is what true leadership is about. There's no one person sitting in an office, shades of Blofeld, orchestrating the whole thing. That's not what's happening. But there are many people in many offices, in the bureaucracies of these states, these countries, I should say, because Americans get confused with country and state, with these countries, whether it be in France, Germany, the United Kingdom, Poland, etc. And let's remember, the Russian situation is confusing this, as is the Zelensky situation, as is the Israeli situation, as is the Palestinian situation. All of these have knock-on effects upon what's happening at the moment. It is tumultuous, but if you see what's really going on, you will begin to understand why certain things are happening. And the Epstein matter is really petrol being put in the engine of the vehicle, so it will get certain ambitious people from point A to point C. They are doing they're taking advantage of a lot of other things as well. But we are speaking today solely about this whole Epstein matter and how it is being used and who is using it and why it's being used. And on that note, I'll say thank you very much for listening. I hope this has been of some interest to you. If it has, please keep the questions and comments coming in so I will know what you would like us to be speaking about. Thank you so much. Godspeed. And if you have truly enjoyed this, would you care to like, share, subscribe, press the notification bell, and take good care. Bye-bye.